So Matt and Hannah, thank you for joining me today. Um, let's just begin with what is a smart hotel? And Mimi, while you try to just give us that definition for us to all base our conversation off of today, what role does IoT play in that smart hotel? So Hannah, I'd love to toss it over to you first.
Great, thanks, Kim, and it's great to be here. I'll give you just like a quick background as to where my answers are coming from. So we're hotel owners and operators, and so we are operating in this space all the time. We're constantly building new hotels, and so one of the reasons that we got into IoT and hospitality is because today hospitality is very complicated with all the different levels and infrastructures between controls. Got the HVAC controls. If you have a little bit more luxury property, you're going to have lighting controls. You have all of the back of house controls for the operators, all the brand specific systems. So you have so many different levels of controls that are all operating on their own platform. And so when we're looking at building a smart hotel, we're looking at some kind of simplified system that pulls it all into one infrastructure and that you can now communicate across multiple platforms, and all these platforms can operate on their own and make intelligent decisions to make a more efficient experience for the guest as well as for the operator as far as energy consumption goes, and other things like keeping up with maintenance and keeping up with things that sometimes go by the wayside when you're relying fully on just the staff of the hotel.
Yeah, that's well said, Hannah. Thank you. And a couple of things I wanted to touch on that you mentioned is one, you talk about a single infrastructure, and then two, you talk about a single place to pull all that data or information together. And so when I think of a smart hotel, it's where we're leveraging both of those. We want to bring data and infrastructure together and then make it much easier to reliably get that information. So at the end of the day, like hotels, they're seeking increased total guest room revenue and operational efficiencies. And so IoT contributes to these as well as a lot of other KPIs that the hospitality industry is interested in.
That's a great start to that. And maybe to continue on getting a little more background from you, Hannah, what can you give some examples of IoT technology in action at the Sinclair Hotel?
Sure. So we are trying to emphasize as much as we can distributing as much PoE, which is power over Ethernet infrastructure, to replace AC traditional infrastructure. And so at the Sinclair Hotel, we were able to take a lot of devices that are typically powered with AC power and convert them to low voltage DC power over Ethernet devices. And so all of our lighting is all low voltage PoE, which is an IoT device, as well as other features. We wanted to have a high tech experience in our bathroom. So we have these smart mirrors, which we were able to convert those to PoE. And those have, TV channels, music, can tell you the weather, can tell you what's going on in the news, what amenities are available at the hotel. And then we have a few other IoT devices, including our mini bar is actually a smart mini bar. It is taking PoE power in the back. And then all of our window treatments can be controlled and communicate over IP as well. So all of those are, kind of unique to the Sinclair. And we're also seeing a few other touch points, like our touch panels are all digital. So we have, touch screens throughout the property, as well as in the shower, we're using a digital shower. So we're really pushing IoT to the max at the Sinclair.
Yeah. What's maybe the most interesting? You've already named one, right? The mini bar, but that I think is interesting. That's a PoE device, right? So is there anything that you think would surprise people in terms of what you were able to make low voltage?
So I think the mini bar is one of the biggest transformations that we had. I think though the most largest infrastructure change that we made was if you're build or operate hotels that are high rises, then you understand that you have to have a UL 924 backup, and it's usually a large diesel generator, and it usually has about 500 gallons of fuel stored on site that you have to change and operate and maintain. It's pretty rigorous with the maintenance. So one thing that we were able to do with our property is we're actually using the very first lithium ion battery solution for UL 924, which has completely simplified the entire process of maintenance, of constantly checking. It has basically zero maintenance, and it can send you alerts anytime there might be a slight issue with the controls, which is done a few times and you can immediately address it. But that's a huge change in the building world to where you're not going to have to rely on these diesel generators that fail probably 75% of the time when we see blackouts, which happens every single time that we see a blackout. So I think that was probably our biggest accomplishment that we had at Sinclair.
Yeah. Matt, you're in this industry too, obviously, and that's why you're here today. But based on what the Sinclair team and then the hotel is doing, which is in the Fort Worth area, well, how is this impacting the conversations in the hospitality industry?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely generated a lot of buzz, right? It's kind of the 1.0 model of the smart hospitality space, and so we're getting numerous folks reaching out trying to understand, like, hey, how is this creating a better guest room experience or a better guest experience, or how is this how can I achieve better efficiencies? And is this the best way to build a property? How can I future proof myself? So all those kind of questions we're feeding those today, and I imagine, Hannah, you're probably getting the same kind of feedback on your side.
Yeah. So, we're thinking, I know we're going to talk a lot about the owner operator side. That's incredibly important to people making the decisions to put the technology in. But from what you've seen, Hannah, what smart technology integrations or features are really taking that guest experience to the next level or that guest notice when it comes to the smart technology?
So for us, the comments, because we get a lot of comments back, feedback, they get the survey after they have to visit at the hotel. So we do see what the guests are commenting on and what they really typically like. And I think the main thing it centralizes is the fact that the guest is able to really customize their own experience in the room. One small thing that seems so small to us is that we have, just a color changing light in the shower, and the guests can choose, do I want to shower with a blue light or a red light? And then at the same time, they can change their exact temperature of the shower and choose, I like to shower at, 108 degrees, or I like to shower at, 103 degrees. And we get comments all the time that said, I never knew what light color or what temperature I like to shower in, but now I do. And so that kind of thing, that customization that the guests can do, and it's kind of the idea that I like to think of now is that customers really want to get something they can't get at home, because right now, with everything with COVID and everything, it might not be to them as safe or as comfortable to leave their house. So the experiences that they get at the Sinclair, like the digital shower, like the touchscreen, smart mirror, those are the experiences that guests are coming back for again and again.
Yeah.
That was great. I'd like, first off, I'm 103 degrees and purple. Uh, but no, it is definitely an amazing experience there at the property. And then some of the other trends or things that we're seeing too is how can we maximize the guest experience through digital engagement, right? So the idea is, how can I take my phone, and how can a hotel leverage that mobile device to interact with them before, during, and after the stay? And so if the hotel can make it easier for guests to plan a trip or check in, control the space, order food and amenities, interact with the property, then they'll be more likely to have those same guests return and tell others about their premium experience. Because it is all about creating that optimum experience that you go home and you tell your friends about, or that you receive the consistent on-demand attention that you're looking for as a business traveler, even. So the idea of blurring the line from the digital to the physical interaction in this physical world, it's critical to hospitality environments moving forward.
Yeah. So just a question from the audience already to clarify it today at the Sinclair, can guests set preferences before they enter the room, or is it an in-room experience?
So today, it is something you have to do on the property, and that's something that is one of the challenges of integrating smart technology into a property like a Marriott, which is that you have a certain level of technology that you as an owner have control over and that you can put in and you could change. And we were very fortunate that Marriott allowed us to do a lot of changes for the first time, really in a hotel and really in a building for a lot of it. But when it comes to certain things like accessing their guest reservation system and kind of moving now onto their network, that's when it starts to get very complicated. And so we haven't been able to access yet being able to reach the guest before they check in to set those preferences, which is kind of where we want to go. We want to be able to, anytime a guest checks into a Sinclair property, that their room is set to exactly how they like it, the thermostat with the lights, with the shower temperature. And so when a business traveler is traveling, 100 plus days a year, they can still feel more comfortable in the properties than just having to go in, not really know what to expect and start from scratch again.
Yeah.
So those are kind of some of the struggles we have with meeting the technology to then the expectations of working with some of these larger brands.
And actually, you're getting into a question I've had. So I think, that certainly you've already explained one hurdle. Are there other hurdles that you either, Hannah or Matt, you experience when a client's considering smart technology for a hotel environment, maybe from the client perspective or the building owner operator perspective? What hurdles are there when you start to think about the idea of implementing smart building technology?
Do you want to go first, Matt?
Yeah, sure, I will. So one of the biggest challenges I come across is that we've got to be involved early on in the project. So usually what that means is we're in conversations at or before the time the architect and or engineer is selected. And the reason that is important is, our stuff is drawn right into the drawing sets, particularly in as part of the electrical plans for the project. And so if the engineer's already been engaged and they've already drawn those electrical sets, then it's, a lot of time, effort, and money's been invested into those. And so the key there is, one, get with the owners and developers early on, such that we're out in front of that, and or if they have already been started on, to interrupt that process and be able to revisit them, and then we're in at the right time. Um,
Mhm.
I would say, like, another one is that there's still a number of influencing parties that are part of the decision making process. The owner at the end of the day, developer, calls the shots on what they're going to do, but then you have architects, engineers, contractors, advisors, consultants that are all steering the ship in what they believe makes the most sense. And so a lot of those times it can cause an obstacle or a disruption, for what they're normally doing. And so the key for us is we want to embrace those folks early and often to show them that it's not that difficult. It is easy to do. It's just a matter of learning a little bit something new and letting us help you along the way.
Yeah, and I'll second exactly what Matt said. He's so right. We're owners and operators, but we've actually recently started designing and consulting for smart buildings because of our experience at Sinclair. And we do find that a lot of the time the hurdles come when you working with different engineers that might not know the system very well, or that have a lot of experience working with other types of systems. And so they're not going to offset to something new that they've never done. And so, it really takes a lot of educating and teaching about the system and really building those partnerships early on in the project, because especially on the electrical side, it's going to change in a big way. And they have to be open to really changing the way they typically design to make it work. And usually with something like a low voltage technology, that's not even often hired by the general contractor. It's just hired directly with the owner, and it's kind of just on top of the scope, and the general contractor's not really overseeing that. And so it really, when it's now lighting and when it's motor shades and when it's all these components, it's so much more important to be in there early on and to really help the other subs understand the difference in scope. And you can't just tack it on at the end. Like Matt said, you have to be in there a lot earlier, because it's not just traditional low voltage where you're just buying a few switches and putting them in after the building's done. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the unique perspectives that your company brings, is that, one, you're an owner operator, but two, you also have the design experience. And so you're definitely the trusted advisor in the process. And so I would say lean on Sinclair as best you can when you're moving your project forward.
We have a couple of questions just to clarify about the Sinclair project. One, can you verify that this is the hotel in Fort Worth in the old Sinclair oil building? And then also, did Sinclair deploy UPoE Plus?
So I can verify it is in Sinclair oil building, Fort Worth. It was built in 1929, so it's a wonderful historic renovation, which was its own challenges and its own right. Instead of a new build, it was much more difficult. We had a lot of problems along the way. And we actually are using 60-watt switches. We're using the CDB 8U, which had just come out as a plenum rated switch when we started designing back in 2017. There were no 90-watt switches available at that time. And now, we've already seen so much growth in the industry since we completed that project. Really Cisco was the only one that made a product that met our needs at the time. And now there's like 5 or 6 companies that have 60 or 90-watt switches that can be plenum rated, go in the guest spaces. So it's really exciting just to see in the few years that we designed and built Sinclair, the advancements in the technology and the amount of partners that are available now.
And I want to open it also to both of you for this next one. It's really about the emergency side of a hotel. So first of all, can you clarify to the audience if you can use PoE lighting in hallways for emergency exit directions and other emergency lighting? And then generally, how would you protect or alert your guests for non-fire emergency?
I'll take a run at it first. So the first answer is yes, you can use PoE for both your normal and emergency lighting. So when I'm talking to a client, I'd say that 100% of your on-building exterior and interior lighting is all now low voltage, including exit signs and lights you deemed emergency. The system is UL 924 listed, so you can once again leverage that single infrastructure to deploy that.
And then Hannah, if there's something like not a fire, but there's severe weather, have you integrated any ways of alerting your guests, perhaps in this IoT system, or do you use more traditional methods for hospitality?
So we have, obviously the fire alarm system that's running all on low voltage, but we actually do partner with a company called Valcom, which makes an entirely PoE IoT platform, which is really a campus scale alert system that can alert for any reason, whether it's, active shooter or, tornado or earthquake or whatnot. And that's a really good technology if you're in that kind of space to where you might have to do this mass alert system. And that's also another thing that I would say that's great about PoE is because you can add all these different features, like we're talking about the Valcon system, but maybe now you want to add in the Igor platform, and you can not only alert your occupants that there's a tornado or an active shooter, but then you can utilize the lighting to guide people out of the building or out of the space. And then you could connect, via IoT and the network to the door lock system and maybe lock down spaces that are, susceptible to danger. So there are a lot of great companies out there, and we're seeing those companies really all move over to IoT because of that amazing connection that you can get over IP and over the network.
Yeah, and Kim, I think there's a couple other projects, not necessarily in the hospitality space, that we've done where we've done a fire station where we're used there to indicate EMS events, fire events, someone's at the door event, it's time to get up events. And then also in K through 12, we've done a number of mass notification type solutions using everything from lighting to monitors to audible noise indicators.
Yeah, and all of this is really, it's all important that everything speaks to each other, which I think is ultimately the best benefit of an IoT platform, like of course ours, but generally considering IoT being something that's a unifier rather than creating separate silos, and seeing in action in these ways actually can be very rewarding, knowing that it's helping people stay safe and so on. So we're getting some good questions here that I'd like to throw your way. I'm going to read you two different submissions that are kind of related. So do you need an engineer seal for designs of PoE systems? For example, can the electrical engineer of record for the Sinclair project design PoE systems? So maybe a little clarification there. And then generally, you know, a little conversation around working with local jurisdictions with PoE.
Perfect. So I will go ahead and I'll give a run at both those. So the first one is really going to be dependent on your location and what your local, state, and city laws are as to whether or not low voltage needs to be stamped and sealed or permitted. Where we are in Fort Worth, low voltage does not have to be stamped or sealed drawings or permitted drawings, and it also doesn't have to be installed by a licensed electrician. So that makes it very, very flexible in Fort Worth. But another project that I'm working on in New Haven, Connecticut, that actually does need to be sealed and has to be done by a licensed electrician. It's not the same license. It's like a low voltage version of that electrical license, but it's still a licensed person that has to be doing all the work. So if you're around the States, just really be aware of your local codes and understand things that you can do and research that, because it is very important and it makes a huge difference on the project. So for the Sinclair, for example, what we ended up doing was we're using technology called Volt Server, which is distributing DC power throughout our building. And that is powering all our networking switches, which is distributed through the building. And so we gave the information to the electrical engineer as to, we need, X amount of power in the basement here. And he, on his drawings, drew those circuit panels. And then from there on, from the basement throughout the entire building, we did all that design ourselves. And none of it had to be permitted or even inspected in Fort Worth. They were very gracious with that. And talking about the inspection processes that we went through and working with Fort Worth, the very key point is that you want to get them involved very early on. And you want to talk about how this is a change in typical building installations. Working with other electrical engineers, it's become very clear that city inspectors don't really understand this technology yet because it's still so new. And their main priority is really safety. And so they don't know about the system per se, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily against the system. They really just want to make sure that you're building a safe building that is safe for the occupants. And so when we went through what we wanted to do, we did some demonstrations. We had, an IP phone, and it was powering and getting data, and we unplugged it and we plugged it into a lighting node, and the light turned on. So when we could show things like that to show how safe it was, and then we walked them through the code and showed how, in the 2017 NEC code, which is what Fort Worth had adopted at the time, it actually made allowances for PoE and said that anything under 60 volt DC was safe to handle and did not have to be handled by a licensed electrician. So when they were able to show them those things, then they approved it and said, okay, yeah, you're right. We agree that this is safe. You've shown us all the spec sheets, and we'll let you do this without any inspections or without any sealed drawings. So it was really because we brought them in early on and we went through all those questions they had that they allowed us to do it, and it worked really well. And it was a great partnership with them.
Do you have anything to add, Matt? Any other tips with working with local jurisdictions?
Yeah, definitely want to get, again, engaging folks early and often is critical. And then, the main things to be thinking about is, and communicating, is that it is can we achieve the emergency lighting requirements? It's usually the number one thing that we get asked about. And so the answer is yes, we can supply whatever 90 minutes, achieving the foot candle level, powering your exit signage, powering your normal lights, and applying those as emergency. And so once you can just show that we have those qualifications and those listings, then it's much easier to get people on board.
Great. We do have a quick question about the Igor technology. So Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute or two at most. Can you explain, and the term used here is explain the Igor controller and how it works, but generally maybe explain how Igor's Nexos technology works.
Yeah, sure. So the idea of Igor is we want to use a single infrastructure to distribute these edge intelligent devices around the building. And we use these devices, they're power over Ethernet, to power, control, and communicate with non-IP objects like a light or a motorized shade or a Bluetooth sensor. then all the network is tied together, leveraging Ethernet cabling or power over Ethernet. And then we'll have a single processor that lives on premise that's then handling a lot of the data collection, as well as creating the scenes, creating the zones, creating the room names, allowing you to control every object in a building from a single press of a button. So you do have an on-prem processor communicating with edge intelligent devices that are then connected to whatever kind of object that you're interested in power and controlling.
Awesome, thank you. And Hannah, your last quick question, and again, all of these could certainly be their own conversation, but what were some surprising cost savings from using low voltage in your hotel at Sinclair?
The biggest cost savings that you're going to find if you're in a market that doesn't require you to have licensed electrical labor is going to be the labor. And you're going to find that the more infrastructure you can eliminate. So we eliminated, by using the PoE infrastructure, we eliminated about half of the circuit panels in our entire building, and we're 17 stories. So if you can think about the amount of conduit, the amount of panels themselves, we also reduced our switchgear from 3,000 amps to 2,500 amps, which was a big savings there. So just the physical material was a savings, as well as the labor. So our electrical bid started at $2.1 million. And when we redesigned the project, it went down to about $1.2 million. And so then that gave us the budget to add back in all the other components, like the digital electricity, like the PoE lighting nodes, like the switches. And we actually ended up, on top of that, we eliminated our dimming solution, which was probably going to be a Lutron dimming system. That was eliminated because we went with the PoE lighting. And so with all those things we eliminated, we actually ended up saving a little bit of money going to a PoE infrastructure than just compared to a traditional infrastructure. So those are the biggest savings that we saw.
And then you know the benefits of a PoE infrastructure. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I was going to say, Hannah, please don't forget the OpEx side of things, because this is definitely not just a CapEx play, but an OpEx play is where our greatest opportunities are.
Absolutely, yeah. We've owned the building since 2014. It was renovated in 2017, and so we actually have the data of the electrical bills we were paying all the way up about 2 years of full occupancy in the building, and it was just an 8 to 5 office building. And we're actually saving 39% energy month to month for a 24/7 hotel that is operating around the clock. It has, a ton of extra HVAC infrastructure, plumbing, electrical that we had to add into the building, and we're saving 39% month to month. So, it's amazing to see that. And that's, with a building that is, over 100 years old, and a building that we couldn't change the windows because it's a historic building. So we have, they're not very efficient windows, but we're saving more energy than some new builds. And the new build across the street, actually, we're friends with that owner, and our electrical bill is less than theirs, and they have more guest rooms, and it's a new build building. So it's amazing to see the kind of efficiencies that you can get by going to this kind of technology.
Wow. Well, and the goal of this is to have these quick conversations. Hopefully everyone who's attended has got something from it. So I'm going to ask our panelists to leave us with a final thought. Just what's next for IoT and hospitality? And maybe Hannah, would you like to kick it off?
Sure. So we are very interested in full DC buildings, and we have seen so much research, so much legislation that's come out showing how great it is to try to have as much DC infrastructure in a building as possible to eliminate those energy conversions. Solar has made huge leaps and bounds the past 10 years. Batteries have made huge leaps and bounds the last 10 years, as well as LED technology has just blown, the construction world away. And so all of those components are DC components. And so I think that the next thing that we're going to start to see in buildings is really a push to get to an entire DC infrastructure. So we don't have all these amazing endpoints, but we're losing efficiency every single step of the way because we keep converting it back to AC to transport it. We're really going away from that and moving to this whole kind of full scale DC microgrid. So it's really exciting to see that. And IoT and PoE is just the icing on the cake that connects the whole building together. and creates that DC infrastructure that makes those efficiencies possible.
Yeah, I agree completely with Hannah on the need for digital infrastructures. So DC microgrids with Power over Ethernet is by far the best way to build or significantly renovate an existing property. And it's because it offers a resilient infrastructure that can evolve with the building instead of being outdated, at day one. Like, so if you were to build traditionally, as soon as that building built, it's already it's outdated. And so with a resilient infrastructure, there's a lot more you can do over the evolution of that building. And then along with this, we'll still see a proliferation of digital engagement throughout the industry. So any way that they can drive a touchless experience, an automated experience, a customized experience, mainly leveraging your mobile device, we'll continue to see that evolve quickly.
Excellent. Well, thank you. There were a few remaining questions, but we're going to send a follow-up email with some more information and where you can learn more about all of this from a technical and from sort of a bigger market perspective. So I want to say a special thank you again to Matt and Hannah for joining us today. And it's always a pleasure to talk with both of you. So thank you, and thank you to our audience. We'll be in touch soon.
Thank you very much.